Welcome to the Tao of Pizza, where we feature top logistics leaders, entrepreneurs, and supply chain innovators and share their inspiring stories with a holistic twist.
Mark Hiddleson here, host of the Tao Pizza podcast, where I talk with top industry innovators in the warehousing, logistics, and supply chain business with a holistic twist. So today I'm going to be talking with Mick Mankowski about mergers and acquisitions, and we might even be able to get into some talk about licensing. But before I introduce Mick, this episode is brought to you by Specialized Storage Solutions. And look, I've been in the logistics and storage industry for several decades now, and we still love providing industry-leading warehouse storage solutions nationwide. So basically, if you have a warehouse that needs rack, shelving, carts, conveyors, or mezzanines, we help with the design, engineering, installations, inspections, and repairs to help clients optimize their logistics operations. And it's funny, Mick, some people don't even realize we can actually help with permit acquisition. So we take a holistic look at your entire business supply chain ecosystem to develop the resources for continually improving your operation. To learn more, visit our website at specialracks.com. Give us a call at 707-732-3892. Or even give my personal email out to podcast listeners. It's markhiddleson@aol.com. So today we're joined by Mick Mankowski. He's the founder and managing partner of Symphony Investment Partners, a consumer products merger and acquisition company. And Mick's also owner of SB Licensing, a consumer products brand global licensing company. Mick, welcome to the Tao Pizza.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Yeah, and I have to say you were one of my dad's best friends. So I've known you for a while. You were I don't know if I told you this or not. We saw each other about a year before my dad passed away. He had that Christmas event, and I saw you there. You met my family. But I remember the first time I met you was in the early 80s. And I think you lived in like Folsom or Roseville, but you had a new house and a swimming pool. I think you had a waterfall. I might have added to some features.
No, you're right. It was a great house. See,
and it had a waterfall, and I was like, this guy is crushing it, man. You had a yellow Cadillac Eldorado. You might have had a Corvette or something too.
Yeah, Corvette, 2 Corvettes.
So I have 2 Corvettes. So my somehow I ended up wanting to grow up to be like Mick Mankowski. So
great.
Share, you met my dad probably in the 70s or early.
The 70s, yeah, for sure.
Well, share how you met, what industry you were in, because I know you were in the apparel, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it was great meeting your dad. I remember back in probably 1974, I think it was, and your dad was in Sacramento, and I was living there as well, and I was working for Hager Slacks back then in the day, and I was their sales guy calling on your dad. Your dad was the assistant buyer, and we hit it off like no tomorrow. We like 2 peas in a pod. It was so fun, and we just remained friends. And matter of fact, when he was getting married to your mom, Carol, we had a bachelor party, and I'll have to tell you about that story offline, because that's your dad. He was a character. He was so much fun, but he loved life, and he was just a wonderful, wonderful human being. He was my favorite guy ever. And we just became really fast friends. And I really appreciated his kindness. It was everywhere about him. There was something he wouldn't do for someone, or he would think of someone, and he was just that guy. And but yet fun. Every day we laughed our ass off.
Yeah.
And it was just a joy to be with him. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I love that house, by the way. My wife, when I built that house in Folsom Lake, probably with blood, sweat, and tears, because we were in our 30s, like early 30s. My wife was in her 20s, and this is our first real project that I'm like, building a house is not for the faint of heart, when you don't have any money. And we didn't have any money, and so we were like doing everything. I was on a tractor. I was like, I did everything. Put every sprinklers in, did it. But it was so fun, and it's great memories. It was a beautiful home. And now we live in Santa Barbara, paradise, and we love it here. So it's been great.
Yeah, and I have 2 Corvettes, but then I also have a pool with a waterfall. I forgot to mention that. I just saw that when I was probably 12 years old, and it's like, man, you're not living unless you have that.
That's great.
So you were at that time, were you with Hagar, or had you were you still in the apparel business, or had you?
Yeah, I was, Mark, and it was a great experience because I got to know Mr. Hager quite well. And it was really funny because not funny, but I had cancer, and the Hager family personally supported me because I hadn't qualified for insurance yet, and so Mr. Hager committed to me that they would pay all my bills personally. And so I got very committed to the company. I was devoted to them because they were so kind to me. And you don't hear of that in business today. And I think that's a missing part, and where I pivoted to today is owning, a couple of businesses that are primarily a lot of service providers to that industry still. But working for Mr. Hager directly became a great experience, and family-owned company, and had over 12,000 employees, and I became like his son that lived on the West Coast, and they were headquartered in Texas, and it became a great relationship, and it taught me a lot, and it allowed me the chance to grow and think big, be a dreamer, and try to make those dreams come true through hard work and relationships, and that established my ability to communicate and work with people, and I really value that. So thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was awesome. So what was the transition like from going to the apparel industry to what you're doing now with Symphony? And I love the name Symphony, by the way. I'm going to ask you who was that your idea, the name
Oh,
of
that
it?
was actually my partner. My partner lives in Washington D.C. and he went to Princeton, and he's a very, very bright guy.
Yeah.
He's more of the M&A. It's kind of a good story because it kind of falls into, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do until I was in my 50s, if you want to know the truth. I I had this journey of life, and I tried all these different things. I owned brands. I tried brands. I had a company in between where I became a sales agent for multiple. What happened was, when I left Hager, I was kind of lost, to be honest. I didn't know what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And a friend called me that we worked together at Hager. And he was with a factory in North Carolina. And he called me and he said, Mick, I'm going to fly you out to take a look at this factory. And they made women's intimate apparel, of all things. And last thing I knew was, the only thing I knew about women's intimate apparel is when your dad and I go to a strip club.
I was going to say the bachelor party keeps coming up.
And so we were like, I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm like, well, I know nothing about this business. I'm like, and this buddy of mine says, Mick, look at the machines. Just look at the machines. The machines don't know what you're making. We got a lot of machines. We need to round out our year-round, business. Right now, we're heavily skewed to spring and summer, and our fall business drops way off. And I said, well, this is interesting. I said, so I saw this machine. I said, what? It's putting elastic onto a pair of panties, quite frankly. And I said, that's a special type of equipment. And he says, yeah. And I says, you got a lot of this. And he says, well, what else can this do? Because I saw, obviously, the panty is a stretch material, and I thought, maybe there's something else. And I just left Nike because I'd interviewed for a job at Nike to be their national sales manager for apparel. And I didn't get the job, but it was kind of a good thing in many ways, because when I was at campus, I met a lot of really nice people. So I said, I'm going to call Nike because their apparel, this is back in the 80s. And their apparel business was only $500 million. And today it's multi-billions, but back then it was 500 million. It was, which is a nice business, believe me. But still, they had problems. And one of the problems was they needed more factories that could do like this type of equipment that I saw this panty factory have. And I said, I'm going to contact my buddy at Nike and see if they need some more of this equipment to produce for them. Well, yeah, next year we were doing $20 million with them. And that's how I started my sales agency, helping factories diversify their production.
So it was like you did contract manufacturing. That's what I call it, contract manufacturing for Nike. So your friend, they made the stuff for Nike, right? Like a third party.
Third party. There was like you're exactly right, a contract manufacturer. But I saw a real need for that, Mark, for companies that needed to diversify their production, because I found a swimwear factory that needed some fall production. I found a t-shirt company that can make fleece. And then the next thing you know, I'm this creative guy. I didn't even know I was this creative, because it was more out of need than anything else. And so I ended up doing about $54 million in my third year of doing this. And it got to be a really successful business. But then a few years later, I'm vacationing in Europe thinking I'm king shit. And then I get a call and they said, we sold our company. And this is the guy I was doing $24 million with. And he says, they don't need your production. They don't need your customers. And I'm like, honey, I think we better go home. We got a problem.
Wow. An opportunity. We call it an opportunity at our company when something like that. So I go, oh, opportunity. Nice.
Well, it's true, because what happened was that it made me realize that I needed to diversify again my life. And so I ended up buying a brand called Barely Legal. I created a brand called Cross Sport, and then I got the license for Body Glove. And so I started my own apparel company. And that became my apparel business that I ended up building. And then a few years later, I had my ass handed to me again by having a flood, and I had no flood insurance. So, you better look at your contracts as far as flood insurance, folks. If you don't have flood insurance, it's something you better take serious, because I lost literally everything.
Wow.
And the best part of that story is I learned so much, Mark. Relationships are so important with factories and people. And one of the things that I'd like to share, and I think is beneficial for any young entrepreneur, is the people that you do business with are your partners. And you better treat them with respect. And you better give them your cash flow. You better make them really understand how you make money, and that you're not getting rich, but you're making a living. And the more you share with your factories, your suppliers, the more they believe you, the more they care about your business, the more they trust you. And that trust really helped me in the long run, because what happened next is a great story. And I'll tell you real quickly what it is so I had this flood. The guy that gave me unlimited credit for my materials. This is back in the day when you had to buy the hangers, the labels, the hang tags, the boxes, the material, and you'd have to manage all of that. And today, everybody gets a full package out of China, and they're like, whoa, I'm a genius. No, you're a genius now because you know how much it cost you, okay? Before, I had no idea what my shit cost, because I had money out in fabric and laborers and hang tags and boxes. And I had a lot of inventory of shit that I really didn't need, but that goes into the cost factor. Well, this guy gave me unlimited credit for my material. Material represented 65% of whatever I produced. So it was very important to my business. And it was also very important that I made him a believer in my future and what I was doing. When the flood happened, he couldn't even get to Santa Barbara to come up and visit me, because it took like 3 days to get here. And so finally he got up, came to my warehouse, put his arms around me. He says, Mick, you're out of business. And I says, I know. And I started crying. I literally started crying. I had no idea what I was going to do, because I owed him millions of dollars. And he said to me, Mick, what are you going to do? And I thought, what am I going to do to pay him back? That was the first thought that came to my mind. Mm-hmm. I said, Robert, I don't know how I'm going to pay you back. He said, Mick, I'm not worried. I'm a very wealthy guy. I'm not worried about me. I know you and Mary Lou are hurting right now. How much money a month do you need to live? I started bawling. I'm telling you, it was the most meaningful thing anyone has ever done for me. Yeah. And I said, I gave him a number, and he says, I'll cover that for a year. I promise you. He says, you need to get back on your feet. And I said, I'm crying. I'm like a little kid. And I said, Robert, I said, thank you so much. But then 6 months go by, and he calls me and he says, Mick, can you come and see me? And I thought, well, that party's over. And he said, can you find me a customer? So guess what I did? I called my friend at Nike again. Okay. I told him what had happened to me. He says, I've got to meet this guy. He flew down the next week. He said, started doing business immediately with this guy. Immediately. And the next thing you know, within a year, he was doing over $22 million with Nike. And not only did he forgive my debt, which is unbelievable, quite frankly, he gave me a chance to breathe life in me. And what happened, so I got honored to be Nike Vendor of the Year within 2 years with this guy. And so at that event, this is the story right here, Mark, because this is how I got to where I am today. I met the owner or a guy that was the executive of a large CPA firm in LA. And they were there with one of their customers that was also up for vendor of the year. And I ended up saying, the guy said congratulated me, and he says, "Can I meet with you next week in LA?" And I said, "Sure. What do you want? What do you got? What do you have in mind?" He says, "We have these two divisions of mergers and acquisitions and licensing, and we're having problems with them. And you know everybody in the industry, and we'd like your opinion of what we should do with this." And it was a CPA firm that had 107 CPAs on the West Coast. And I went in and they said, "We will hire you for a week. How much do you want?" I gave them a number. They said, "Just give us what we should do with this business." The next day I called them and I says, "We need to have a meeting." And he said, "Well, why?" I says, "I'll tell you when I get there." I got to the meeting. I said, "Close the business." I said, "Your employees are ripping you off. You're dying. You've made a mistake with people." And I just told him, I says, "Close it." I said, "You don't need to pay me anymore." I said, "Just close it."
Wow.
Next thing you know, he says, "Would you come in and run it?" I says, "You can't afford me. I'm making all this money with Robert, the guy that saved my ass, And I'm like, and he says, "Well, no, we'll pay you." And I said, "Oh, here's the number." And I said, but I won't do it for that number. I says, "I'll do it if you give me half the business. Give me. I'm not paying a penny, but you got to give it to me."
Yeah.
They said, "Okay." I'm telling you exactly what happened. And the next thing you know, I own half this company. I knew nothing about mergers and acquisitions. I knew very little about licensing. And I'm part owner of this company. Now I got to figure it out.
Yeah. But it's your relationships and your Rolodex and your the relationships. I mean, I found a little piece that my dad wrote one time. I think it might have been a resume or something. And it was talking about building business. It was one of those aha moments where you don't really know what your dad does. I was in college, I think, at the time. And I was like, wow, my dad is good at building business relationships. Like, this is amazing. So
It
that's
really
a
is.
great story. And so that's the Symphony is the M&A company that was started
Yes.
out. Okay.
We changed the name because it was associated with the accounting firm. And I knew that if I wanted to do business with other accounting firms,
Mhm.
I couldn't have that association anymore. And so I changed the name to Symphony at that point.
So it's a great story. And this timing is, I mean, I want to get together with you for over a year, really, since we started the podcast, since I hosted the episode. You watched the episode I did with my dad, which was a lot of fun. But we talked
Yeah.
about business and relationships and stuff like that. Pretty sure your name came up on that one because you're a famous part of my dad's story. But we've had in the past few weeks or few months, people in the accounting, like I hosted a accountant, but they look at what did he call it? It's just like strategic accounting. So they work with consumer packaged brand CPG. I had to Google what CPG was because we only deal with CPG brand. So that's one of the reasons I had to brag to you is I keep using CPG over and over again because now I know what it means. And then another guy is because there's a lot of like what you were doing with the contract manufacturing and using excess capacity. That was one of the things that fascinated me about the warehousing businesses. They're seasonal warehouses. So a lot of our clients, they have one client, if it's food, they're harvesting. So once they harvest, they got to bring everything to his cold stores and they ship it out during the year. So there's times of the year where they're empty. So they have to fill it in. Well, now with technology, you can do that with capacity the way you did with Apparel. You can do it with warehousing. You can do it with even shipping now. This Bulu, Paul Jarrett. So Joey Spangers was the from Tycor. That's a great episode. The other one is Paul Jarrett, and they call it the tricky ship because they fulfill orders from people across multiple platforms. So it doesn't matter. You could have a Walmart online store, a TikTok store, Instagram, all these different stores, but the orders all go to one place. They may not even be fulfilled from one place. This stuff could ship from 5 or 6 different places, but you're getting one bill, one place, and then all your
Yeah.
information is right there. They call it a 5PL. So this is perfect timing with your expertise in this business. But how is your logistics set up for stuff like that as far as delivery, fulfillment?
Well,
Does
it's interesting because that's a great question, Mark, because it's changed so much, as you just alluded to, is that, I remember like even when I started, a good example is when I bought all the components and then made it, and I didn't know what my costs really were because as I said, it was spread out. You didn't know how much inventory you really had and all this excess stuff.
Yeah.
Now you do full packages out of somewhere else, China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and it comes to you as a finished product and you just reship it. Well, today they have 3PLs, which never even existed when I was in business. Okay. I mean, like when I had and that's a big component of the logistics today is how that works compared to owning your own warehouse.
Right.
3PLs are a really, like in my business, like I'm actually going through this right now with one of my clients and I'm selling his company, and he's so sold on having his own warehouse and but he doesn't ever know what his costs really are.
Yeah.
Whereas a 3PL, you know exactly it's going to be me 35 cents a garment or whatever it may be. Okay. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's X amount per month. And you know what your costs are.
And it's a rubber band. It could flex. You might be using a little bit of capacity at sometimes of the year and a lot, but you'd somebody space and they just bill you for what you're using. You have your own warehouse, you're paying for the whole thing all the time.
Well, it's funny you say that because to help my client that owns his own warehouse, I brought in some customers that needed some warehouse space. So I just introduced them to other customers and I'm not in that business, but I said, this guy needs that. His warehouse is too big for his existing business. He once was a $200 million business. Now he's a $54 million business. So he doesn't have that flex like the rubber band you just said, And so he needed to bring in some customers and was starting to act like a 3PL when he really wasn't.
Yeah.
And so, that's a interesting change in the world today in consumer goods. And I don't know where it's going. I do know that like Costco, people like Costco have to store goods too. When they rather than return it to the factory, and let's say they have a brand and they have a deal with the brand that they got to take it back after 8 weeks of being on the floor. They don't want it on the floor now.
Yeah.
Well, but Costco will say, well, I'll take it back in 6 months from now. So you got to sit on it for 6 months. And you're like, I didn't plan that into my cost. But that's where the world is today.
Yeah. Yeah. We just hosted I just hosted a podcast with Dennis Hong of Pattern. They're completely a reverse logistics because the cost to bring something back to your warehouse is like double what it costs to ship it out, just because the return logistics. And so they end up with Dennis, their company, a lot of times they'll buy people's returns. We have I've had people on here that do Costco projects because a lot of the stuff at Costco, they want them in 24 packs or 6 packs. So however it comes from the factory has to go to another value added, packaging place or 3PL where they put them in 24 packs or 30 packs. We've got one place, my favorite one, they come in 6 packs of 1.5 liter bottles of wine. And Costco, you have to cut the top off the box. So we have a customer, Western Wine Center, they take the box, they cut the top off and put everything back on a pallet and then send it to Costco. And so the stuff doesn't go right from anywhere to anywhere anymore. It gets imported and then it gets sent to a warehouse, to another warehouse, then it ends up on the shelf.
Well, it's interesting because Amazon has, there's several companies today that are what I call e-commerce type businesses.
Yeah.
They have inventory problems today. They really do. They have, you're getting a lot of brands, for example, that have no idea how to go direct to consumer, but they know they have to have some element of their business to do that because they're not, direct to consumer is being a retailer, and they've never been retailers in their life. They've been wholesalers.
Yeah.
And that whole world is kind of difficult to manage today. And I think that, there's one company in LA, I don't want to name it, that's literally sitting on probably $100 million worth of inventory that they don't know what to do with.
Wow.
And so how does that work into their bottom line? I mean, come on. I mean, you got to do some serious.
You got to sell a lot of panties to make $100 million bucks
to take care of that.
Yeah, Joey Spangers. That's why I keep thinking when you said you had all this stuff and you didn't know what your costs are, the tools for accounting have changed, right? You can track a lot more things and have things.
Yeah.
But you'll have to tell me after we close out. I want to know who that company is. We'll see if we can sell some of their stuff. See if we can get lucky, right?
better be lucky. Better be dumb. I got dumb luck, like your dad would say. You're a
Yeah.
dumb Polak. He'd always call me a dumb Polak, so.
Well, I love saying your name, Mick Mankowski. I have another friend named Rob Zawolinsky, and I've always called him Kozlowski just because I like the sound of it. So, so share a little bit about how people are managing that. What are some of the things you're seeing as far as business model? Just from really from any perspective. It doesn't have to be distribution or how they go in the market. Um, what are some of the things you're seeing that are work, or what are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the mistakes people are making?
Again, a great question, because we have such emphasis today on direct to consumer.
Yeah.
And one of the things, just to pivot to another, I'm on the board of directors of a company in Detroit that does customization and personalization. That's getting to be a big, big, big people. It's a business people don't even realize how big it is, and it's growing by leaps and bounds because the consumer appetite for customization, making it their own, is really, really a big deal today, and it's not going to slow down. It's and the quality of the printing has gotten so much better than it was before. Before it was a spray-on technology that was really truly crap. If you want to know the truth, it was just crap. Now it's fantastic. They've
What are
really
some
come up.
examples? Give me some examples of products. Like I'm thinking of calendars or something like
Like particularly on apparel, because apparel has a different substrate, it's hard to have that consistency of color because you have fabric, and fabric is difficult unless you do the whole, like you do like a normal screen print process, which is very arduous, and it takes forever to set up, and it's costly, and that's why, you look at team sports, for example, like any kid that plays in any sports, it's they want their shit customized. They want it to look cool and with their name on it, and they want it to be theirs. And do that process. Like Fanatics is one that's sitting on an absolute ton of inventory because they got into the old technology and it just didn't work very well. And so people like to talk about Fanatics as and I think it's a great concept. And the guy that owns it's a freaking genius. Okay. I give him credit because it's bizarre how great he has built the company in the billions of dollars of sales. Well, they got problems with inventory because they have a lot of old technology. Can you imagine putting one number on every, and then then the kids, it's a big deal. Okay. Now with the new technology, with this customization, and I went to recently. I went to the imprint show. It's called in Long Beach, and they had all the equipment there showing the new, latest, greatest technology for this. I'm telling you, this is the future: is customization, and it like one of the pieces of equipment may cost $600,000, so it's not cheap to get in. You better have deep pockets to get into that business, and it's no different than like logistics. It's expensive to be in the logistics business. It's not cheap, but it's a great service, and that's where I think the future for the apparel industry is going to be changing quite a bit because of consumer demand.
Yeah, we have a few. We don't do a lot in apparel. We do have a few recently that we've done projects, and it's a different business. But give an example of so when you licensed Body Glove, I love and what was the other one about Barely Legal and Body Glove?
Barely Legal. Yeah.
So how does the licensing degree? I'm not even sure how it actually. So how does something like that work?
Well, the brand owner is called the licensor.
Okay.
He owns the trademark and the IP, intellectual property.
Okay.
And so, and that's gotten to be again a huge change for particularly the apparel, footwear, accessories sector, because there's companies that are buying these brands, and some of the brands are old and tired,
Right.
but there's still a life to them. And so what they'll do is they'll buy a brand like, let's say Nautica, for example. Okay, good brand, great brand. I love that brand. Okay, and yet it got tired because the market changed.
Yeah.
Well, the guy that bought it is a genius. He bought the brand and then he licenses it all out in all the different categories, like you see for Tommy Bahama out there with the Costco with chairs, and you got things that you would normally would never see that brand on. They extend the brand into all these other categories through license agreements, the companies that specialize in that category. For example, like Tommy Bahama doesn't make the chairs. They have a company that makes them for them that sells to Costco, for example. So that company that makes it is a licensee. He pays a royalty back to the owner of the brand to be able to use that brand to go out into the marketplace for that category. So that's the world of licensing. And they'll hire people like my company to help them because again, as you said, it's all about relationships. I've been at this a very, very long time. And so there's hardly a company within this particular space that I can't call and contact the CEO. Hardly one. I mean, it's not a huge industry. You think it is, but it's not that big. Okay, it's a somewhat narrow focus, and they trust my. I'm not going to call them to waste their time.
Right.
If there's an opportunity, I learned from a friend of mine who's head of Houlihan Lokey, one of the largest. Reuters ranks them number one in the world for any sales under $1 billion. It's called Houlihan Lokey. And my friend runs the consumer products division for that. And he told me something a long time ago that I think is really important. He said, Mick, because he wondered, he says, you've got this deep Rolodex and why aren't you using that more? And I says, Steve, I just feel bad about calling people just for my own benefit.
Yeah.
He says, well, don't call them then. He said, but call them if you can create value for them.
Yeah.
And that changed my whole attitude about relationships and how I use them and what I do and who I call. If I truly believe in my heart it's a benefit for that person, then I feel good about calling them. And it's not a negative.
Yeah.
And that changed me. It really did. That one statement from my friend changed that. And I think it's important for all of us to realize that it's great to use your friendships, but don't use your friendship, add value to your friendship.
Yeah. I love doing that. One of my specialties over the years has been acquiring used equipment. And so we get some wild calls sometimes. People are like, you want to buy this? And I look at it and it's like, well, I don't know anyone who's going to buy this. Sometimes it's packaging machinery or anything. But I will think of, people who know somebody but I'm not calling them just like, hey, buy something off me. It's like, hey, there's an opportunity to buy something used. I thought about you because in your business, or a lot of times people are asking me to be on the lookout for stuff.
Right.
So when I'm calling, It's not just to say, hey, what are you going to buy off me next? I haven't heard from you in 6 months. I was counting on $100,000 in revenue. What's going on? But it's a value add. That's a great point. And you call somebody and then people take your phone calls.
They really do. No, they know you've kind of filtered it for them. You're not just there to push something down their throat. And that's one of the things that as a salesman, it's really hard because you got to sell what the company gives you to sell, and so you're kind of pushing stuff that you may not even believe in sometimes. That's the hard part of being a salesman, in all honesty.
Yeah. And it's lucky in this career. I was in the car business for a while when I was in college. And that's where I earned. I'm not afraid of customers anymore. After 5 years of doing that, I've pretty much seen it all. I've been called names and everything else. But people usually end up liking me at the end. Because
can't imagine why you're such a good guy.
It was like, why were you yelling at me? They say, look, we don't want to talk to you. But it's one of the things I love about our business. Where people are usually, even cold calling really doesn't even exist because if you show up in our industry, and we're competing with like forklift companies, other racking companies. When we show up to someone's warehouse and say, hey, we're in the neighborhood, we just want to introduce ourselves, we're doing a project, they're always happy to see the racking guy. That's one of the things I love about our business, because there's not a lot of people who do what we do. And there's usually somebody has a project, that it might be a damage or small, something to get in the door. What other advice would you give to salespeople on that? I love anything that has to do with sales.
It's funny. I never thought of myself as a salesman. Because the salesman I met I was impressed with. I thought, whoa, that guy's got a gift of gab. He's fun to be with. He's a party guy, my kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like this book. My major was statistics and probability theory. That was my major in college. And I thought, because I'm this nerdy, guy that I thought, how the hell did I get in sales? I mean, I'm not one of those guys. I'm not a party animal. I'm like this. What I didn't realize is I was a party animal. I liked it.
Yeah, well, it's funny that it's more work than that. A lot of people do see the party animal part of the relationship building process, and a lot of I've been to a lot of conferences. You were talking about, what was the garment one you just went to in Long Beach? What's that called?
At the imprint show.
The imprint show. The conference is what I found. You could go to the breakout sessions and the round tables and you could really learn a lot, but where people told the real stories and the real problems and the real things that we're working on was at the bar.
That's right.
Or the pool, the swimming pool.
No,
It's like, I remember when I was first going to those conferences, I went to every single conference, every single round table. I was president of my local council. And then one time I was just kind of tired, maybe hungover, I don't know. I decided to go to the swimming pool instead. Like, I'm not doing any of the morning sessions. I learned more that day at the swimming pool than I did the entire rest. Have you found that to be true? I mean,
well, I got a great story for you that I'll never forget. I'm still a young buck salesman, and I had my racks of clothing, and I'm waiting for the buyer. They had the buyer day, and I'm waiting in the lobby, and I'm waiting with all the other salesmen, and this guy is standing next to me he had a pad, a paper, and I'm like, well, he didn't have any samples with him, and I'm like, what's he going to do? He's going to talk. This is sample day. So the guy goes in before me, and he was there for like 10 minutes, maybe. Okay. He comes walking out, and I go in, I roll my racks in, and I have them all covered, and I take him into there to the buyer, and I said, but she says, well, what are you going to show me, Mick? And I says, I'm going to leave them covered. I says, Bob was here just before me, and all he brought in was a pad of paper. I says, Linda, I'm a young guy. I said, can you tell me what he asked so maybe I can be a better salesman? And she said, that was really nice of you to say that, Mick. She says, he asked me these questions. And I wrote the questions down. And I says, did you give him the answers? she said, yeah. So he's going to come back next week and show me what I really want. I said, I think that is a great idea, Linda. I says, I'll be back next week. Okay. And the next thing you know, I learned to work with buyers very differently, doing what they would need, understand what they need, understand what their goals are, what sells, what didn't sell, why didn't it sell, what's going on in the marketplace. It really made me a better salesman. And that's when I woke up, is at that meeting. It was, I remember it like it happened yesterday, and it happened like 40 years ago. And it was like one of those moments, as we all have at some point in our career, when we say, I can do something better if I just know what the buyer wants.
Yeah, that's and focusing. We just had a guy on the podcast. It's the hasn't been released yet, but he's in sales, and that's one of his biggest things. A lot of salespeople make the mistake of just going in and just going through the whole brochure, the walk around, and everything they can offer. And it's like, it's not even close to what the guy wanted. And it was like, that was the 8 minutes you had. You just told them everything you can do, and it's not what they want. So starting out with that list of questions is that's awesome. That is great.
It was, and it's helped me throughout my career. Actually, is having that approach, and again, being a guy that really tried to understand, in my world, what actually sold and what, I really dug into the details of the actual sale and what caused it, and I ended up having my own warehouse because one of the things, like being in the pant business back in the day, the sizes that sold the most were always out of size, always out. I'm like, this can't be right. I said, I got to figure this out. So I said, I know what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry those sizes in a warehouse. And the next thing you know, I'm like the best salesman in the world because I was now giving my customer what they actually needed, the sizes they needed. Like, how difficult was that to figure out?
Right. So they make a certain amount of 30s and 32s and 34s and 36s and 38s, but then you need more of the 34s, right? 34s.
That's right. 34s and 36s were the best sizes. It was like absolutely, like, we're always up in, in these colors. And so I said, oh, I'll carry 1,000 pair of this size and 1,000 pair of that size. And I would only fill in, it was a crazy business. It was like nutty. And so the next thing you know, I made salesman of the year. And I'm like, And I'm telling you, I was not a good salesman.
You were.
Okay.
It should have been accountant of the year.
Yeah, we should have.
Statistician of the year.
Yeah, it was funny. It was just, but it was so fun. Those are great learning years, though. It really helped me be who I am today. Really, Mark. It was really, that's why the journey is the best. If you just keep learning and trying and don't give up, and because those are the things that you can give up at any time. You get upset because shit's always going to happen to people.
Right.
You can't avoid it. You just can't avoid it.
Unless you're not doing anything. That's one of what my boss told me one time. He's like, well, remember, you got problems because you got a lot of projects going on. Right? If you didn't have any projects, you wouldn't have any, or we call them opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
Opportunity. So what's for Symphony, what's a good opportunity? Where do you find, what's a good business? How do people find you, or what's your ideal client? Like if somebody is,
again, you got some great questions, and that's one that is always top of mind for me is, where does all this come from? Where do these opportunities stem from? And it's the most bizarre thing ever, because it happens just because you're out there, you're talking to people, you're visible. One of the things I try to do is on Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday, because I really am grateful for the life that I've been given and the opportunities that have been presented to me. And it's my favorite time because there's nothing associated. There's no gift giving. There's no this, there's no that. It's a time to look back and say, boy, I've been very fortunate. I'm really lucky.
Yeah.
And I send out a little note I send out 4,000 emails.
Wow.
And it's just to tell people I'm grateful for their friendship and thank you. And that's it. Nothing more than that. And the response I get is almost bizarre. It's like, and I'm not a marketing guy. I mean, I'm not one of these marketing geniuses that figure things out. I just want to be appreciative. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's by being honest and appreciative and being truthful with people and actually really being grateful, and I think that's the important thing.
Yeah.
And that's as a result, the things just keep coming my way. It's like, in my world, there's things where people will sell a company, run a process. It's called a process. When they run it, and they'll, you go to an investment banker, and that investment banker, we're like boutique investment bankers is what we really are.
Yeah.
And a company will say, will you run a process on ours? And I say, I don't need to. I'll just make 5 phone calls and I'll sell your company. I said, otherwise, I'm not taking on the job. I'm not going to run a process because I don't know who the hell. Because usually what happens in a process is some idiot buys a company, overpays for it, and then they're angry.
Yeah.
I don't want people to be angry at me. Maybe if we're selling them a piece of shit, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Okay. So my experience is like, I know the industry because I've been at it for 50 years.
Yeah.
I know who to call when I have a gem. I won't take it on if it's not a good deal for someone.
Yeah.
And what my son was working for me, and he's super smart. He was pre-med, and he's a great young guy. He worked for me for a year, and he didn't like the business, but he said something that was really astute. He said, "Dad, you're a business psychologist." He said, "You have to know what the customer wants. You have to know what the problems are." It's like I look at the business today when I'm selling a company, I try to break it down because I'm not as smart as my partner. My partner's really smart. I'm not that smart. And I said, I got to make it simple so I understand it. So I look at the business as 4 pillars of the business. What are the 4 pillars? Well, in my world, you got to have product. Product is king. Okay. You better have money because you ain't going to make it if you don't have money. That's pillar 2.
Pillar 2 is money.
Pillar 3 is you better have some good salespeople. You better have. There isn't a truck moving on a freeway if somebody hasn't sold something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And the other pillar is you better have good people because you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And so when I look at the business, I look at those 4 things. And then I say, what is that owner really the best at? What is he really good at doing? What is his superpower? And it's usually one or two of the things, not all of them. No one can be good at everything.
So one of the superpowers is going to fall under one of those pillars. Like somebody might be really good with the money and the finances, or they might be really great at sales or great at the product. They have a great product, but missing.
Right. And they better be good at sourcing. Okay. Because sourcing today is critical. And honestly, more money is made on the buy side, what I call the buy side, the sourcing side, than it is anywhere else. If you buy right, you can sell right.
Yeah.
And that's something. So I dig into those elements, and then I try to understand, how is that owner, is he replaceable? Because if he's a designer, for example, and the designs go away, who the hell's going to buy that?
Yeah.
You better have a good designer themselves. So I dig into that level of detail when I'm looking to sell a business. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's the 50 years of experience that allows me to do that in a very quick way. Like, you'll take a lot of investment bankers that work at Baird or some of the Bain or some of the big companies. Mm-hmm. They're not specialists. One day they're selling a medical device company, and the next day they're selling a trucking company, and the next day they're selling a bakery, the next day they're selling a food chain, or they're selling something. Right. We don't do that. We focus on the consumer products business, and that's what we're good at.
Nice. And so you can make good decisions in a short period of time. So it also saves people time. So you don't have to do a process, because you can look at it and go, I can tell you what this is going to be.
And then you work with entrepreneurs that are like they're the most beautiful people in the world, these entrepreneurs. I love America. Oh my God, this is a great country. Holy shit. We are so freaking lucky. These other communist countries and all this crap that's out in the world today. Yeah. We are just lucky we live in the United States.
Yeah, we are lucky. Yeah, we are lucky for that.
I am so sold on entrepreneurs. It's the heartbeat of America. It really is. And we got to give them credit. These guys put everything on the line every day. And now we have all these rules and regulations that totally screw them all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's making it harder and harder for these guys to exist. I mean, look at $20 an hour in California for food. I understand California's expensive. It really is.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying people don't deserve to have a better life for their families. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
But everything is going to be more expensive now. Everything.
It really is. My kids were telling me it was fast food is one. Because my kids, their mom never gives them any fast food, so they spend their own money on it. So they're really aware of how much it is. And
you've got some great kids, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I love Cody, Serena, and Drake. They are they're great. They have my dad's sense of humor too. We were playing. Oh, when you talk about my dad being a wild man, we were playing this game called Cards Against Humanity, and there's all these. Have you heard of it? Do you know what it is?
No.
They're like dirty phrases that you need to it's like charades or something. You give hints, and my dad didn't know what one of the cards meant, and he leaned over and asked Serena. She was probably 20 at the time, and the word was queef, and my dad didn't know what it meant. So when my daughter explained it to him, he started rolling. He was laughing. He was like 76, 77 years old at the time, and he was laughing and kicking. He was like a little kid. He was in a ball on my couch, just kicking, laughing, and crying.
Oh, God.
But my kids were saying, McDonald's, it's $15 for one person. And I'm like, man, if you had a family of 5, that's $75, not everyone's ordering that the same amount, but he said a few years ago it was $9 for the same list of stuff. So,
I don't know where it's going. It's just going to get more and more and more. Like, look at everything over the last 3 years. We've just gone absolutely insane. My daughter lives in Texas, and she's a builder. She builds barn-style homes down there.
Yeah.
She's got 8 kids, and she owns her own construction company with 65 employees. And, you talk about challenges, but I was going to buy a house down there, and it was on a lake, and just pre-pandemic. This is just before, pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. And beautiful lake home. I've always dreamed of owning a lake home. It was one of my dreams. Okay. And I thought, I'm going to do it. And my wife says, no, we're not going to have a place in Texas. Okay. And I'm like, oh shit. Well, today that same house was $2.7 million. And it's like, honey.
We left some money on the table.
And I'm like, oh, dude, that was a dumb decision. We should have
Yeah.
bought it. But anyway, that everything has gone up. To your point, it's just really interesting to see how and I just feel bad for these kids because it's just, I mean, they're gonna have to make $250,000 to live.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, well, Mick, we're running out of time. I want to talk to you more. I'm excited. You've shared some awesome stories. I mean, the story about losing everything and rebuilding, I had no idea. Um,
Yeah,
this has
happened
been
twice.
awesome. What's
Happened
that?
twice in my life. So I'm like, that's why I say never give up. Never
I
give up.
love that. I love that. So I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Do you listen to any other podcasts besides? I know this. I always ask people, "What's your favorite podcast?" I know this is your favorite podcast.
It's my favorite podcast because it's the only one that's ever invited me to be on. So I'm definitely my favorite.
So this has just been awesome, and so we're gonna have in the show notes. I'm gonna have a link. I mean, if somebody wants to sell their company, apparel company, or licensing or anything that you want people to contact you, right?
Absolutely, that'd be great. Yeah.
And yeah. So are you using, one last question, are you using any new technology or anything that like our company, we started using Slack about a year ago, and it's a way to manage projects of people. Are you using anything new tech?
I really, I need to. Let me be frank. I'm old school.
Yeah.
I'm still. I think for a guy my age, I still do. It's surprising that I'm still as active. I'm 77, and I'm having a ball. If I wasn't enjoying it, I would retire. But listen, I enjoy just what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I enjoy the interaction, and I really like helping people.
Yeah.
It's like, if I can help make a difference and better their life, whether to sell their business or help them acquire a business to help them grow, it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And that's really why I continue. It's just, what am I going to go fish? I love fishing, by the way. I go to Alaska. I love fishing. So that's another whole story.
Yeah, but it makes it fun when you do it once in a while. I mean, I think if you were fishing 5 weeks in a row, like this is more of a
it's
job.
true that this is too much like work.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is more work than my work.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, Mick, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're one of my dad's best
Mark.
friends. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, and it's so great to reminisce about your dad. There's deep love here for that guy. He was so meaningful to my life, and I appreciate you as a friend too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for keeping that email string alive. There was a period in my life where my dad and I, it wasn't like we weren't talking, but we just weren't visiting every day. But he had me on that email string. That's some good emails, right?
I know they've slowed down quite a bit. I hate to say, your father would give me a lot too. Trust me.
So thank you for keeping me on that, because every time I see one, it warms my heart. So
great. Well, thank you.
This has been awesome.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the Tao of Pizza podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.